My name is Reyes, and I was raised in Connecticut. I moved out here in 2010 and now own and operate with my wife the Mango Tree Fitness and Muay Thai. Well, it really started, I was like really hyperactive as a kid, and my dad just wanted me to burn some energy. So, started off in the garage like a lot of kids when I was a little young age. And when I was old enough, my dad signed me up for martial arts. It was a kickboxing class. I started with kickboxing, and they had a Muay Thai guy in there. So once in a while I'd get with him and he would show me some throws and clinch and stuff. But in looking back, it really was like an Americanized version of it. And I continued to train in kickboxing and a little bit of Muay Thai all the way up through my teenage years. And it was really the only sport that and judo were the only sports that I actually really connected with.
And growing up, did you when you got into Muay Thai, did you watch a lot of Muay Thai too?
Yeah. I watched a lot of Raymond Decker. I watched a lot of Duke Rufus. I watched a lot of Steve Millis, Kong Napa. I watched a lot of the old school guys, and I really admired the groundbreakers, the ones that brought it to America.
And where were some of the different schools that you had trained at?
My home base was at Sityodong in Boston. That's our affiliate gym. But I also trained, I stepped in once in a while at the Watt in New York City. I traveled to Fight Fitness. I did a couple camps out there. I went to Thailand a bunch of times, trained at 13 Coins. I trained at Fretex in Bang Pli. And I dabbled around Connecticut in again, that Americanized version of Muay Thai. I feel that martial arts really drags you into like an uncomfortable part of life. I feel like martial arts really builds you from the inside out. I think, most likely other sports do as well, but for me personally, there was nothing more motivating than combat to push me to really push myself, especially if you hate losing. My first fight, I was 8 years old. I was 8 years old, and I remember there wasn't another kid around my size to fight with, so I fought against a bigger kid, and I remember I got knocked down, and I don't know, it was really fast. The kid was big, and he hit me with a hard teep, and it knocked the wind out of me. I wasn't expecting that kind of size and that kind of mass coming at me. It was a much bigger kid, and I got dropped. I got back up, and then I got dropped again, and the fight was stopped. But I remember my dad telling me to stay down, but I remember getting back up and getting back up. It's funny because like years later I had a fight that was very similar where I won. I began to see how tough I actually am. It was a part of myself that always reflects everything, like business, life, relationships. Years later, I had another fight. Again, it was a bigger kid. And I remember it was actually the first time I actually knocked somebody out. It was stiff and it felt so good. And it was scary. And it was crazy technique that I never threw. It was a spinning heel kick. I threw the left kick far, and then I spun right into the heel kick and I knocked him out. And I remember thinking most kids, now as an adult, I think most kids kind of would have freaked out. But like thinking back on it, I really enjoyed it.
and growing up in Connecticut, what was the Muay Thai scene like out there on the East Coast at that time?
Jeet Kune Do and an unevolved version of MMA. I say Jeet Kune Do because the first generation of Muay Thai that came out there came from Chai Surasu through the lineage of Burton Richardson and the rest of the Jeet Kune Do guys that were out there. All the Muay Thai that was out there was all through that lineage that was linked in with Jeet Kune Do. But other than that, there was American kickboxing.
And did you do most of your competing while you were living out of Connecticut? Did you fight when you went to Thailand?
Yeah, I fought in Thailand. Nothing big. I didn't have the opportunities that I give my students. I wish there was a Max Muay Thai back then, like Travis and Zach can fight Max Muay Thai. I wish I could have, but I just didn't. I did temple fairs, bar fights like all tourists. I did a few bar fights. Yeah, and I had fun.
And what was that experience like, being that most of the foundational Muay Thai you had was more American based, and then trained in Thailand for the first time? What was that experience like?
I'll never forget my first time. It was the most humbling experience as a martial artist I had. I was already what I thought was an experienced martial artist. The first time I went out, I think I was like 17 or 18 years old. I went to Bangpli and I was training at Fairtex, I went in with this attitude, like, yeah, I want to fight. And I said this to them and they were like, kind of laughed at me, like, okay, all right. It was really humbling going on the run and then training and then clinching and then more mitts and more mitts and more mitts. And then my feet were all blistered up and I didn't want to be whiny because I was already used to being combative. But yeah, it was the most humbling experience. I've been back to Thailand so many times where the wow is gone. When I land, my mentality is almost, all right, it's time to get to work, right? Like I never got into the party scene. I never enjoyed drinking out there. I always went to work. If it wasn't for cornering a fighter or working an event or training myself, then every time the plane landed, I was like right to work. I think I was about 23 when the mango tree first opened, and the reason why that happened that way was there was no other Muay Thai in Connecticut. So I would go to Thailand, train, and then or I would go to Boston and train. I would go to these places and train Muay Thai, and then I'd come back to Connecticut and there was no Muay Thai. So, you know, I'm pretty proud to say that we laid the roots for Muay Thai in Connecticut. And I think the lineage of coaches that I left behind speaks for itself. Rob Cipriano, Stacy Skipacia, Matt McCusker. These are a couple of the coaches that I left behind and that are still coaching to this day, and they're amazing yet. Those were the first generation of my students back in 2003 when the mango tree first opened up. I went through like a really rough patch in life around 2008, and I picked myself back up, and I needed to sell my gym probably around 2009. I sold my gym, and I remember not having any particular direction, but for whatever reason, I'm laying in bed, and I just had this like voice in my head saying, now, go. I didn't have any family out here. I didn't have any money after selling my gym because I had to pay off debts. I literally had $600 to my name, and I bought a $200 ticket, and I came out here. I didn't have a job. It was literally a leap of faith. I was like all or nothing. And the funny thing is, when I left, I didn't have any intention of doing business with martial arts. I had no intention of it. I said, that's it, I'm done. I was a little burnt by it. When I landed, I picked up a job with Powerhouse Gym to be a personal trainer. And then the very first thing they had me do was hold this, what was it, one of those promotional booths down at a martial arts event. I was like, dang, this life just keeps following me. And then everyone's talking to me because I fought in Bellator and they saw me. I don't know, it just followed me. The martial arts life just followed me. I just got sucked back in, I just went with it. Life was kind of crazy. I ended up teaching jiu-jitsu for a number of years. I came into Hawaii with my black belt. I went all the way up to my second degree in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I was coaching Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for a little bit. And then I got this opportunity to move to Tahiti. I was coaching in Tahiti for a year. I think that made me a really good coach because having to coach without the language is really hard. It's really hard, and for whatever reason, I couldn't learn to speak French. When I came back here, my wife and I, we met at UFC Gym. We were killing it. I was top trainer 4 years in a row, and that was the first time anyone has ever done that on the martial arts side. And she was top in supplement sales. The money was there, but our purpose wasn't there. Within this sandbox that the corporate gyms gave us, we weren't able to affect as many lives as we felt we could be affected. That's what I wanted to introduce to Hawaii, was another martial art. A lot of people can fight. Hawaii is full of fighters. This is the most talented community of students that I've ever worked with. Kids are training in the garages since they were little, and they understand combat already. So to introduce them to a martial art, it's a blessing, and to see it grow from there, it's amazing.
And what was the Muay Thai scene like when you initially came out to the islands?
Very tongpo, very, very outdated. I'm talking like still whacking their shins with bamboo. And one of the things that I brought to the table was evolution. I leave about 6 times a year. You know, I'm constantly going to seminars, I'm constantly going to workshops, I'm constantly upping my education. And I come back and I share that with the community. During COVID, I left the Kapolei Academy open, but it was hot in there. It was a warehouse space. There was no AC. And I was gonna close it down, but it's the kids out there. The kids need it out there. because it's in their culture to fight after school. If they're not going to practice, they're going to fight and get in trouble. So I would rather give them the outlet. So that's the reason why I kept a West Side Academy and chose to move it to Pearl City to allow it to grow. We are thinking about going back to Kapolei, but when we do, I'm going to open it up as a nonprofit. It's hard. It's really hard, especially now with the pros. When I'm dealing with the pros, I know that promotions are looking for the most marketable athletes possible. We can't market well and we can't sell tickets well from Hawaii, like LA fights or Kansas City fights. It's hard. And then not only that, I want to pick venues that offer fair judging. That's hard. Muay Thai scoring across the US varies between different organizations. I mean, that's the beauty of having Max Muay Thai and having Thailand open to compete in Thailand, because the judging never changes, the scoring never changes. I want my students to know how tough they are and how tough they could be. I want my students to know that whether they come in here for fitness, to lose weight, to learn a martial art, I want them to push themselves to the point where they walk out of here a little bit better every single day. Show me. I don't want to hear it. I want to see it, and then when I see it, I'm going to offer it. And it's not like my levels are impossible. My levels are very hard to meet, because I'm not going to risk my students' health and well-being just because they're lazy. And I'm not one of those coaches that throws fighters in just to boost the school. Really, just show up to class. Really, just show up to class. I think in Thailand it's very easy because the culture is already established. Kids over there grow up watching Muay Thai. My friend Brian opened a gym over there out in Isan, and he showed me video clips of the kids, and they never trained Muay Thai before. But within a couple weeks, within a couple days, some of the kids look like they've been training for a long time. And the reason being is because they've seen it already. They grew up with it. Over here, we're starting from scratch, where Thailand is already starting with a head start. Teaching those basics to even adult students takes time. I have a whole different foundations program just to show people how to march, how to hold their hands, the proper cadence for strikes, and then even to hold pads. Culturally, that's the biggest drawback. Oh, it's amazing. I think as a sport, I think it's going to get better, that Muay Thai will become more worldly known. What I want to leave behind, a lineage of tough people. Not just in the ring, not just on the mat, not just in martial arts, just a room full of tough people. I think the world needs more martial arts. Just to show people how tough they are. They don't gotta whine about everything. They don't gotta cry about stuff that, you know what, if you could build someone tough on the outside, then they could be tough on the inside. My students, I want them to be strong at whatever they do. I want them to be entrepreneurs. I'd be cool if they're fighters. I want them to be teachers. I want them to be entrepreneurs. I want them to be good parents. I want them to be strong women, strong men. I want them to be strong individuals that are putting strong individuals that are creating strong individuals. And that's my legacy. My name is Reyes. I'm here in Honolulu, Hawaii, head coach of the Mango Tree Fitness and Muay Thai. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope to see everyone soon. Aloha.
It's the coldest hand that run down this land, where the ocean lands